from the Salvation Army National Headquarters,
this is the Fight for Good podcast.
Well, hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Fight for Good podcast. I'm your host, Lieutenant Colonel Tim Foley, broadcasting from the Salvation Army National Headquarters in Old Town Alexandria, Virginia, on the banks of the Potomac on a beautiful spring afternoon. We welcome you into our discussion today as we are looking at the June 2021 issue of the War Cry. Here with me, as always, is our War Cry editorial director, Mr. Jeff McDonald.
Pleased to be with you as usual, Colonel Foley. Thank you. Quick quote from this issue as a preview. The God of big miracles is also the tender giver of tiny ones that happen every day. We just need to be watching. I don't know how cicadas fit into that, but we're seeing this as well.
Yes. For our listeners, we are under attack here in the mid-Atlantic area. Some of you may have heard that there's like this 17th invasion of cicadas. Jeff, I always love the sound of cicadas in the dead of summer. They're somewhere around all that stuff, but they are in mass. I mean, in my backyard, there are thousands and thousands of them, and they're all hanging on any high spot that they can get. And they haven't ramped up yet, but we did hear them this morning. You could hear them a few blocks over, and it was pretty loud. So, yeah. Hey, welcome to our world. It's a beautiful thing. Also with us today is our very quiet, debonair, very sophisticated and savvy producer of the Fight for Good podcast, who has been with us at this point for 82 episodes. And Elizabeth, we welcome you once again into our podcast. Thank you for all you're doing.
Thank you. I'm stoked to be here.
Well, I will today, Elizabeth and Jeff, I am kind of officially informing, though I know you guys know this and a few people have known it, but we're coming near the end of my voice appearing on the Fight for Good podcast. We were excited with this idea, Jeff, a couple of years ago, and we were very fortunate to have hired the brilliant Elizabeth to join us. I think it was in April or May of 2019, somewhere around there, I think. Am I right, Elizabeth? Has it been almost 2 years?
May 2019.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I still remember when we interviewed you, and we were just so impressed, and we've been really impressed with all the work that you've done promoting the Salvation Army's publications and all the little things you do behind the scenes. Jeff, she is so skilled at PowerPoint and graphic design and even proofreading and contacting people. Elizabeth, you've done a fantastic job with the Fight for Good podcast. And you've also launched the Battle Line podcast, with our sister podcast, which covers youth culture.
Thank you. It's a lot of fun.
So hopefully you keep that on your resume, and maybe you'll have me call in on episode 1000 of the Fight for Good podcast. But my wife and I, Jeff, we're being transferred, and we have 2 pages of transitions that are happening at national headquarters this summer, and we've listed all of that in the June issue of the War Cry. But we're heading to Seattle, and the good folks in the Salvation Army Northwest Division, which covers all of the state of Washington, northern Idaho, and a good chunk, but not all, of the state of Montana. And my wife is going to become the divisional commander, and I will become the divisional leader of officer development. It's more of a pastor to the pastor sort of job, I guess you might want to call that. But Jeff, we're going to have a little bit more to say about that in a farewell episode. But I just want to thank you at the beginning here for all that you have done these last 2 years by my side, and I've greatly enjoyed our banter on and offline with our podcast and many other discussions we've had.
It's been a joy. It's been great work. It's hard to believe we've done that many podcasts. We've covered a lot of ground in our podcast as well as in our editorial work. And we've benefited from your experience and knowledge and wisdom, Colonel. So it's been really a joy.
It's kind of a mixed bag of emotions for me. And I don't want to spend this podcast talking about that so much, but this really is my last war cry that I've been responsible as editor in chief. So that this will make issue number 24 for me. So 2 years and a good portion of those, Jeff, we have produced in our basements from all over the DMV area here. I'm very proud of my association with you and the entire publications team. My hat goes off to you. Thank you for producing another great issue of the War Cry.
Well, what can you say? With Elizabeth's help and everybody else on staff, we pulled it together. And, I think communication, empathy, knowledge, persistence, commitment to what we do has all shown in what we've produced in these challenging times. Interesting, though, that your column in this June issue, Ever is the War Cry, really drives home a fundamental aspect of what we do. And, in this secular age that we live in, we're dealing with the theme of happiness in this issue, but in this secular age, there's so many approaches and schemes and ideas and paths to follow that people hope to find fulfillment in. And yet in your editorial, you talk about the bottom line of bringing salvation to the world and impacting people one life at a time, which we do through the written and communicated word. And I think of, Wesley's line, the soul have I to fit for the sky. And, I think that emphasis on salvation and what it means can elude many people today, but you refer to it in your column so wonderfully. So thank you for that.
The means of getting the message of Jesus Christ out to the world. I mean, there's all sorts of ways that it can be done. I can recall as a Corps officer in not a small town, a mid-sized town in Arizona, we were seriously exploring how to do it was like a cable, the cable TV in the area always had to do, they had to offer free public access. We were talking about ways that we could do back in the 90s, how we could do our broadcast, how we could take care of that medium, all the different sorts of things. We used to go out on street corners. We called it the open airs, and we used to preach the gospel out there. And, all of that kind of stuff worked culturally in a different way, but we're in a different era and people still read and people still resonate. And this magazine is still being read by hundreds of thousands of people across the country and the world each month. And we're really thrilled with content and the quality of content and the quality of comments that we get. And more importantly, the people that are making a profession of faith or people whose lives are being saved. And Jeff, we put some interesting letters to the editor here. As you know, that was something that was kind of, the letters to the editor portion of the War Cries kind of come back and forth, kind of come woven in and out of the magazine. And it was something that I was willing to do and bring it back a little bit. We even have published some of the criticism. I mean, there's some people, Jeff, in this business, there are crackpots out there that want to, take aim at everything, but I think, this particular issue on page 7, has, and it's not because it was an article I wrote, but it just really touched me of how this one anonymous writer talked about how one of our articles really, really saved them. And that makes that makes all this effort worth it.
Yeah, isn't that
if you
great?
just do one,
Yeah. That sentiment in that letter is right. That's about the article on you. There is still hope that you wrote. He said that day I had nothing left, and then this magazine made its way into his hands, and that article just gave him hope for another day. So that's pretty amazing.
Jeff, as you know, we got another. Just before the broadcast, I opened up another letter to the editor came again expressing a similar sentiment of how the war cry has, given them hope and given them a new lease on life.
Yeah, so God is still active in our land, right? And he does use our means, however imperfectly may be, to work his will, and that's what we delight in.
We've been committed to making sure during this pandemic era, and aren't we all glad that we're coming out of this? It's very exciting to it kind of feels like the cicadas. We're coming out of the ground and we're about ready to make noise in the public arenas again of life. Jeff, I've been seeing advertisements of shows on Broadway and where I'm heading in the Seattle area. I'm kind of paying attention to a lot of the news and things there. I'm excited to see the theater coming back to life.
Man, the lineup at the Kennedy Center for this coming season is awesome. To Kill a Mockingbird with Richard Thomas and other great plays. Oof.
I know before the pandemic, I think Hamilton was supposed to have another run at the Kennedy Center. And I don't know if that's going to make its way back this time, but definitely. But Jeff, we have been really focused on people's well-being, trying to deal with some of the mental health issues. You and I, kind of skipping ahead a little bit, I'm going to just kind of pop in and out of this particular issue. You and I had the privilege to talk to a Georgetown professor, Dr. Stanley, Elizabeth Stanley, about stress and trauma through personal experiences that we go through. I found it kind of interesting when we were talking to her. There were so many things that she was sharing with both of us that was resonating with me with some of the things that I've gone through in the past and what I was going through at that particular time. If our listeners haven't heard that podcast yet, I believe, Elizabeth, that one's coming, or did we already drop it? I forget.
That one is already dropped, but it is in our feed.
It's in our feed already. So you may want to go back. Jeff, you did a good job trying to compact a lot of different things that Dr. Stanley had to say, to share with us.
Yeah, and we thought it would be pertinent because as people do emerge from this time of COVID and the stresses that they've endured, certainly there will be lasting effects. Mental health is a big concern, and even trauma and post-traumatic stress is a factor. So we thought she would be a good subject for an interview, and her book Widen the Window deals with, research in this area of recovery from trauma, but also her own experience is really moving. What she went through in her own progress to overcome trauma, stress, etc. So, she offers very practical steps, and she has a whole program that she has a military background and is before being a professor and has done training in post-traumatic stress in the military. So, yeah, that was a very interesting article. We hope that our readers find some hopeful items in there to pick up on.
It's not an interview, but it's an article. It's a compilation of our discussions with Daniel Kennedy, who is on a podcast that will come after this, I think, right, Elizabeth? Is that the timing of it?
That's right.
Yeah, the reason why I know that is because it's listed in the War Cry. It's episode number 83. But we would really encourage our readers and listeners to give that podcast a look, and also go to www.healthylonglife.com. I was so impressed with Daniel Jeff. He was just a lot of fun to talk to. And he has a video series that's available on Amazon Prime, I believe, and on YouTube. And he offers a lot of different things on his website. And I'm even seeing that whole thing about there's a free vitamin D3. People are saying, well, how are you going to survive all that rain in Seattle? I'm like, it's good with me. I have D3 and zinc. I'll be okay. So I think we were both impressed with what Mr. Kennedy had to share.
Yeah, I mean, he traveled the world putting this docuseries together that people can access on his website, healthylonglife.com. But he went to all these countries where people, to see how people were living healthy lives and what the ingredients were. And he was very down to earth. He was great to talk to, very relaxed, very practical as an approach, and respectful of the spiritual dimension of life. So he offers 5 tips in this article for healthy long life that people will find useful.
We have recently launched our another podcast with Major Jason Swain, our assistant to the editorial director. Major Swain has done a lot of background stuff for us, and he is also under farewell orders. So this is his swan song, but we're working on finishing a book that he's compiled on some kind of unknown backstories of the Salvation Army early days in the United States. And Major Swain has committed, readers will continue to see his contributions all the way up until the November issue of the War Cry, where the highlights of history. We've said this over and over on the podcast. Elizabeth affirms to it. The history elements of what we post online and in our magazine really resonate with a lot of people. And here's one more thing about Donut Day, the Donut Girls. But, the thing that I love about the Donut Girls is the Salvation Army was the one that brought the donut into fruition in America. Whether that's good or bad, Jeff, I don't know.
Oh, that's good. Let's face it. Yeah, all the varieties. They didn't have the variety back then, but now we do.
So that's coming up real soon. I think that's coming in I think the first week of June, but they actually put the ingredients here, how to make the original donut that was served to the doughboys in World War I. A lot of interesting history with that goes about, but we're grateful for that. We're also grateful, Jeff, I really like that we've put the spiritual formation page on the back of, on the inside cover of the back page. It just kind of stands out. Captain Emmanuel Masengo is our contributing writer for that, going through the rest of this year. We're very, very grateful for what he has done. And Jeff, he's becoming the Territorial Youth Secretary in the Western Territory in July. So him and his wife are under a change of appointment. But thanks for continuing that. That was something that was near and dear to my heart. We created that right away, and it's been nice to have several different people contribute to that. So I hope that remains a mainstay for the War Cry.
Yeah, that's just one example of how you brought in some really good writers into the magazine. Captain Masengo being one of them. Really, really on target writing, and then we have Major Annalise Francis contributing to core values, and he has a lot really poignant points. Boy, look at that alliteration. Whew. But yeah, she really has a good messages she's sharing. And this one is when it's all been said and done, how the believer's role is to faithfully walk in what God has provided. So yeah, those are really good voices in the magazine.
I think it's important too that, we get that our listeners and readers understand that we're very intentional about making sure that we bring in new voices, we bring in diversity, we bring in people from a wide range of experience. I'm looking back the month of June. I'll have celebrated 39 years of active service of the Salvation Army, and I'm under that 5-year window now towards retirement. And I look back on the foundation of all the things that I've done, how the Army has changed, how society has changed, how the methodologies all changed. But the opportunities that I've had have been just tremendous. Jeff, I can't rest on the laurels of what I did in 1982 when I was first out of the training college as a young lieutenant with a full head of hair, I might add, full head of hair, the shag haircut of the day. But Jeff, thanks for making this making it happen, because I know that our different writers have different styles, and then you kind of have to work with our editorial team who may not like this or that, and we've had those kind of discussions as well, because I like to remind people I'm not really an editor. I mean, they got the wrong Foley. My wife used to be the editor of the high school newspaper and the yearbook, in her hometown. I just was a goofball, with all the drama geeks. But developing these writers, I think is really, really important, kind of a side mission of the publications department.
Yeah, and we want to encourage people who have that desire to express themselves in writing that, keep us in mind, submit something, query us, reach out. You have something important to say. And, there's so many stories in the Salvation Army, my goodness, they're at the local level, what's happening in people's lives and programs and efforts. It's just beautiful to represent. An example, case in point, we have an article by Diane Urey in this article, the Ambassador of Holiness, on bearing witness. And I think we're dealing with the theme of happiness. And one thing that comes through is that happiness can, certainly an individual pursuit, but also occurs in community. And that's the point she makes, that in this time of COVID, she's been in contact with people who have introduced her to what the difficulties, the challenges they've had, and it's made her life richer as being part of it. So it's an interesting article she gave us.
Yeah, I mean, you could do a whole podcast with Diane and Bill on some of these particular topics, and just I just remember the fear that last year that we were dealing with at this time, kind of the boogeyman virus, which was very real and very destructive, but how that triggered a lot of people in response. Just recently here in the Virginia area, we had a run on. All of a sudden the gas stations ran out of gas because people started hoarding gas. They were literally hoarding gas in plastic bags. It's like, you're like, oh, so our fears sometimes can become so crippling and debilitating. And so Diane does a nice, true and simple way for us to overcome it. Jeff, one of the things that I'm very proud of as I leave is the commitment that we've had to our Latino community, the Spanish speaking ministry that we have in the United States is tremendous. All the territories have committed officers from all over Latin America that have become, that are American citizens, and the ministry that we have to our Hispanic congregations and people in need is tremendous. And you and I have had many discussions about this. We've talked about different ways, and I'm collecting all the issues. I'll have all the 24 issues that I'm responsible for. But I look back and I see the evolution of how we've developed this particular session, and how proud I am of Major Ruth New, of what she's done. This particular 2-page spread of Como Tu y Yo on Ecuador. I can't read Spanish, but I can kind of understand it, and I can kind of speak it a little bit, as I was a pastor in a barrio section in Southern California. But I tell you what, there's a recipe here that with these jumbo shrimp in it, I'm ready to jump on that. I'm like, I'm going to head down to Giant Supermarket and just get the giant shrimp, because your Giant Supermarket, you should have the giant shrimp. So I wish I could understand all the ingredients, but anyways, making a little bit of a jest there, but I'm also very serious that I appreciate all that Major New has done to kind of bring this section to life, and hopefully our Latino community friends will appreciate the efforts that she's making.
And she's really taken it on and run with it. I mean, it was her idea to come up with a devotional and an interview with a Latin American representative of the Army in action and a recipe. And she's thinking graphically as well. So, and in terms of design. So, and she, knows the heartbeat of those folks in Latin America and can speak to them. And that's what we look forward to doing more of.
I hope you sign her up for another year, because I think she has a lot more to share. And I've been really appreciate the work and the creativity.
Yeah, she's great.
Another thing that we've done is we have a couple of little features. Michelle Caceres, who is your assistant, and we've had Michelle in the early days. She was on our podcast, and she's come in from time to time, and then she interviews our influencers. She's taught you and me so much. She every time I talk with her, I remember how old I am and how out of touch I am, and I'm okay with that. But both Michelle and Elizabeth really have their pulse on the millennial and the Z generations, which both those generations always get knocked, just like you and I, Jeff, growing up, us baby boomers, Xers, we used to get, beaten up too. But there's a nice interview with Rachel Ramirez, and we appreciate the work that Michelle has done. Jesus, you can follow her on Instagram at Jesus Loves Hipsters.
Yeah. And she's a Salvationist, and she's, aspires to social work, doing social work and community outreach, and is, in college pursuing that degree, and has a great testimony there. So, yeah, Michelle's great. She probably would, we try not to be too chuggy with her.
Chooky?
I have no idea what that word is.
I'm like chooky.
Chuggy.
So what do you use it in a sentence?
It's like, older people who try to act cool.
Oh.
But don't pull it off.
Oh my gosh.
And I think she, we try not to do that with her. Try to act cool, because she'll call us right on the carpet.
Yeah, but the rest of the time, I mean, we're just two old cool dudes.
Y'all are hip.
So hip, yeah. But yeah, chuggy is the word, I believe.
Another little fun feature that we've installed over the months is our 10 questions with, and we've gotten a variety of different folks that are associated with the Salvation Army: employees, advisory board members, officers, volunteers. It's been a lot of fun. Major Swain has done that. I believe, Jeff, he has continued that. He has enough for the rest of the year. He's been working steadily behind the scenes on that.
Yeah, another innovation though that makes a difference. Yeah.
And when we talk about innovation stuff, one of the things that you taught me was that a magazine always needed to be kind of fluid, both in its content and its design. There needs to be flexibility. And I've had a lot of fun, because I'm a trained actor, professional actor, but the strength of my training isn't classical theater. It's improv. It's like just doing things spot in the moment,
Oh, good. Yeah.
And I kind of felt like I had 2 years with the War Cry to kind of improv things, try things out. So I'm looking forward to in the future to see what kind of things you, Jeff, and Captain Satterley will be infusing in here. So we know that some of these things will need to kind of come in and out or just go away, but we'll look forward to a lot of good things in the future.
Yeah, thank you for that. And we do need to remain fresh. And, in this business, there's symmetry and there's asymmetry. And, we're just trying to present cogent material for the reader to make a difference for them. So, yeah, you've set a high bar for us.
We have an annual feature that we do starting in the summer issues of the War Cry, and that is we do the testimonies of cadets. And we get 2 testimonies from each of the training colleges, and we publish one in the magazine. So we'll have June, July, August, and September. We'll have these testimonies. And then we also, Elizabeth, I believe you put the other one online, right?
That is correct.
But we're so excited. He's a cadet right now, but by the time this podcast and this magazine kind of is going, he's a lieutenant. Lieutenant Jonathan Herzog from the Western Territory. His testimony, he shares with us how he came to Christ. And Jeff, guess what was one of the things that aided him?
Just so happened that what came across his where he was confined was the war cry.
There you go. The effect of the war cry in our prisons, in our rest homes, our shut-ins, is tremendous. And you and I have had our share of battles recently in trying to defend that and remind people. But here you got a new lieutenant. It's going to be sent someplace out in the Great Western Territory along with his wife and his kids or his child. A testimony of God's grace and God's work. It's not the war cry that saves people. The war cry is a tool. It's a channel, and it's how God uses the words and how the Holy Spirit sparks the soul. So there's a great testimony. We encourage our listeners to check that out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the great story. And boy, these cadet testimonies are really so revealing of their earnestness in their pursuit of what they consider good and worthy in life and the purpose that they're seeking.
We're also, we're not a public relations spin magazine. That's not our toll. Kind of like, I don't feel like that's our mission, but certainly our mission is to tell the Salvation Army story, which we do. And we have this Army at Large section, which is usually the last thing that kind of falls together because we try to get most of the current events. As you know, when you're putting something like this together, it's 2 months before the fact. And Elizabeth, you do a great job with, staying up on a lot of the different current events. One of the powerful things that will happen in the future is when the publications and the community relations teams kind of merge in some way. There's distinct channels of communication and more opportunities to kind of share the story of the Army. But I've always appreciated the hard work, Jeff, that you and other members of the staff go in collecting all these hodgepodge stories of what's happening with the Salvation Army all over the world.
Yeah, we try to. We consider it a spotlight. We're not trying to be so much timely as representative of what the Army is doing in its 5 regions zones around the world, and we try to represent each continent where the Army is active, which is it's a beautiful thing.
It's something, again, we should be proud of. I get tired of some of the people that are in the organization that kind of want to they know all the wrinkles and warts, and they want to just kind of focus on the bad. But how God is using this organization all over the world, in particular in the COVID times, is tremendous. And the ministry that's coming out, that's going to be there in the future. I just hope we can pause, catch our breath, do a little rest for the rest of us, because there's greater work ahead for all of us.
Amen to that. Thank you for that.
Well, thank you for what you're doing with all of that. And the last thing on this issue that I'd like to point out is in the center section, it's a 10 Steps to Happiness. It sounds kind of, simple, whatever, but it's actually light reading and very thought-provoking. But also, Jeff, I'd just like to point out that this is kind of an opportunity where our design team is showing its creativity and things that you and I talked about 2 years ago. When I look at this section, I'm like, man, we did it. We got to that place where we've kind of opened the magazine up a little bit and has a different vibe and feel to it.
Yeah, you are so right. That we have to be concise and to speak to the times, the vernacular people are used to. At the same time, the theme of happiness, which we dealt with in this issue, there's so many roads to happiness, so many ideas in the secular society we live in. There's a lot of research on it, but we kind of drew attention to the scriptural, the biblical perspective on it in conjunction with what we know from research does result in feelings of contentment, happiness, fulfillment. So, yeah, we encourage readers. I guess readers will get a sense. Anybody listening to this will get a sense that we're kind of proud of what we put into this issue.
Yeah, it's a good issue, and I appreciate Jeff. This one, though, I compare it to the May issue, the cover.
I know.
But
I hear you.
I'm partial as an old guy to nature scenes, things that I can look at that make me want to take a nap. But
well, Colonel, just because of this, we just talked to Elizabeth about we're going to post a survey on posting our covers from last year and having people rate them.
Oh, okay. Well, make sure you send me via the Pony Express or a pigeon service out to the Great Northwest. Out there where Lewis and Clark discovered, things.
Right.
Make sure you let me know, because I'll be very happy about that.
Yes, and of course you can participate in that survey yourself.
Oh no, I never. I know what happens. No.
But so no doubt your theater background has influenced your role as editor-in-chief and National Literary Secretary, because presentation, communication, staging is all involved in what we do.
Well, we encourage our listeners to read the June issue of The War Cry with its fancy-dancy modern cover, Jeff, that you and the design team came up with. It's a lot of fun, a lot of good stuff in this particular issue, and we encourage everybody to be an ambassador for The War Cry.
Yes, and to again, be a participant. We love our fans, we love our feedback, and we love those who want to contribute to the ministry. So anyone who has a story to tell, let us know. We appreciate you taking a few moments out of your busy time, your busy schedule, and some of you now are commuting again. You're heading back out of your bunkers and getting back into society. We're glad that the world is opening up again, and we encourage you to continue to be safe and continue to lean on the Lord and trust in Him with your whole heart, and knowing that God has a great plan for your life, and He wants to unfold that right now, even in these very strange and difficult times. But God is our ever-present hope. Well, that's going to end this episode of the Fight for Good podcast. Be sure to subscribe to Fight for Good wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget to follow The War Cry at thewarcry.org and Peer Magazine, our award-winning youth magazine, at peermag.org. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Well, until next time, this has been the Fight for Good podcast. Bye for now.
Subscribe to Fight for Good wherever you listen to podcasts.